Okay, we're gonna start. Okay, so we're gonna start by telling your age. Go ahead.
I was born in January 2nd, 1935. I'm 88.
Don?
I was born in 1939. I'm 84.
I was born in 1942. I'm 81.
1946, 77.
Just a baby.
Okay, I've got a few questions we'll start out with. The first one that we're going to ask is how, you might need to do a little background story, but there was a power wagon. How was that power wagon acquired and what was it used for?
I bought it from Larry Baldwin. His dad was dispersing the properties of Bloomington Packing Company. And they had used it around the packing company one of its jobs, it had a boom sticking out on the front of it. And when somebody would bring in an injured cow or hog or whatever, they would pick it up and take it and drop it into the killing floor so they could go ahead and butcher it, even though it couldn't walk. Okay. That was one of its jobs. Another job that they used it for was to haul the ashes. They had to have a lot of steam and hot water, and the ashes from the furnaces, they'd throw it on the back of the fire wagon and haul it off and dump it. That was its main occupation before I got it.
And what did it do after you got it? What did you use it for?
Everything. we set logs up for Rick's cabin, a lot of those logs for the cabin that he built. Mm-hmm. Don and Lauren and everybody would come down in the fall of the year, and Lauren and I would take the power wagon, go up on the hill and find dead trees. We drag it down to the bottom, and then the rest of the younger generation, like Mark, and would chainsaws and cut and split, and load it in the dump truck.
And there's a picture over there by Grandpa's old guitar of a day of cutting wood. We had about 5 trucks completely loaded and rounded up. And that came from cutting the dead trees. They was usually dead, dragging them down, cutting them up, splitting them, and loading them in trucks and trailers. And that was one of the best days we ever had, but we had a lot of help. But that was, anyway, there's a picture over there of it.
Okay.
And explain the pilot.
And what?
The pilot.
The pilot.
Who was the pilot?
Yeah, you cut it and I'll pilot. Okay.
So at these events, I guess you could call them, was that a time when sawmill soup was made?
Yes.
I need you to explain, because there's a lot of younger people, what sawmill soup is.
Well, we decided to call it that because Barbara was working at the beauty shop. She wasn't home. And these guys all come in. And the rule was you bring a can of soup.
Any can.
Any can. We dumped it all together, stirred it up, and that was sawmill soup.
Now, if your recollection remembers, was it any good?
Yes, it was always
very
good. When you cut wood for a half a day, you're hungry, and it doesn't matter what it tastes like, it's good.
And it was usually cold outside, and hot soup always worked.
Because it was in the fall.
Good. Yes, it was
We started about Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And cut till Christmas or thereabouts.
And if we was lucky, we'd have a cracker with that soup.
Just one.
Well, we did run out of crackers one time. We had to use cornflakes.
Now, did those go in the soup?
Yeah, put them in the soup.
Yikes.
Hey, if that's all you got,
Make it work. Okay, here's another question. Bill, this is directed to you. Can you tell the story of who lived up on the holler, on the hill, and the house that caught fire, the guitar, and the baby?
The house was, yes, it was up on the hill, a little bit to the to the north of the house that we live in. Grandpa and Grandma Spriggs, Homer and Mary, were a young couple, and my dad was a little baby. And Granddad had went out. I don't know why, but he went up the ridge a ways, and when he'd be out like that, he always took an axe with him. And if he found a limb down or something that made good wood, he'd drag it back with him. And it was a cold, blistery day, spitting snow, and he was coming down the ridge, and the snow was coming in from the other side, hitting him right in the face, and he was just walking along, dragging this limb behind him, and he walked right up to the edge of where the house was, and there was just a pile of ashes. And some lumps it out in the middle of the ash pile, and he didn't know whether it was Grandma and the baby or what. So he got a pole and went to punching around, and it was an old trunk that they had in the attic, and it had a lot of clothes in it, blankets. And that's what was the hump. So then he got to looking around more, and there was tracks at the door, and he saw that they had gotten out of the house. Now, Grandma, our dad,
There's wagon tracks, wasn't there, or sled tracks?
sled tracks.
Yeah.
Because there was snow on. Our dad, Noble, was just a little bit of a baby. And it just happened that great-granddad, William P., Granddad's dad, lived down in the valley. And he had seen the smoke of the cabin burning up there. And he harnessed up the team and went up there and got Grandma and Dad and had to taken them back down to the house before Granddad come back to the burned out house. And he didn't know what had happened until actually he looked around, he could see the tracks and figure out what took place. But people were more observant then, and they could figure out what happened by just what happened. The signs left on the ground.
So now we got that, the guitar and the baby out,
Okay, you
right?
want to know about
The rest of the story.
The important things did come out of the
when
house, right?
Grandma rolled Dad up in the blankets and started out the door, the guitar was hanging on a nail right beside the door. And well, she grabbed that guitar and she couldn't get the door open and carry Dad both at the same time. So when she got the door open, she threw the guitar out in the yard in the snow, and it broke the neck of the guitar. And Granddad always said that she should have thrown the baby out and carried the guitar. And don't Mark have that?
I think, yeah.
Some of these boys around here has got that guitar. Yeah.
Silver pieces.
Who does have it?
Does Mark have it?
Yeah.
You have it?
Excellent, all right.
Okay, Dawn, I have a question for you. Can you tell us about Effie and John walking up the holler and visiting and getting haircuts in the dark?
Okay, the Effie and John was the ones that lived up on the hill, and Granddad lived down in the bottom. And we'd start in the middle of the afternoon, pretty day, and to go walk up and get a haircut. Now, John didn't have any electricity up there, and he used the old clippers that you work with your hands. Well, we'd sit around up there, and they'd start telling stories, and all afternoon, and all at once it started getting dark. And Dad said, well, we got to get haircuts. And there was about 3 of us probably getting haircuts. And it was dark. And so Effie would get the coil lamp, and she would walk around the back of whoever was getting a haircut so he could see to work those clippers. And he pulled out a lot more than he cut. But we all got haircuts that night and started back down over the hill, which is really steep. And so black, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. But Grandpa knew every rock on that hill. He led the way, and we got back down to the bottom and back to the house.
So
How's your hair look?
how'd you look the next morning?
How'd I look?
Yeah.
Like I had a tore up haircut.
A what? Tore up there.
Now, was this man a barber?
No, just a country barber that just the people in the neighborhood would go and get a haircut.
Go and get a haircut. Okay, now, and Don, can you tell me about Lester Woods? The shoveling gravel from the creek, put on the driveway. Something about a hood.
So Lester Woods was shoveling out gravel and putting it on people's driveways for income, right? And somebody made some sort of hydraulic scoop.
Bill could probably tell you more about that. Him and Dad had an old homemade tractor and set up behind Sharon's house for a long time. They built a front end loader to go on that with a scoop on the front of it, all homemade,
Strap iron.
out of scrap iron.
We didn't buy any pieces of material. We used what was.
And took it. At that time we was needing gravel for the old filling station that we had up there at the garage next to the highway. And Lester come down. He'd been shoveling a hand in his truck, I think.
I think so. Yeah, he didn't have any.
He didn't have
kind of
any way to load it. And he seen that work. He said, "My lands, that's really good." So he went and bought a new loader,
to put on his tractor, existing tractor.
Yeah, put on his tractor. So that was the beginning of front end loaders. But we used that around a lot, that old homemade thing. And that's kind of the story behind that.
It was sturdy enough that you could just pick the back of a car up off the ground with it.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Do you ever feel like you missed your calling?
No, you just did what you needed to do.
You just survived. What you had to do to survive. Lester Woods probably made a lot of money on gravel.
Okay, the next question I have is, and I hear Barbara might be a part of this story too. How did the well come to be?
Well, I mentioned that they would put you down in it to clean it.
Well, a well in those days, we didn't have pumps and electricity, and you went down, every so often, you had to go down in the well and clean it out good, because debris got down in there, and you drew water with a bucket. And Barbara can tell you her version, her story about this.
Barbara, did you clean the well?
how,
Well,
how deep was it?
It's still there. You can still see
Yeah,
it.
you
Well, I'm not going in it.
so who dug that well originally?
I
We
suppose
don't know.
It was there from the beginning.
It was there when we were,
So
before we were.
probably God. Then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
In the beginning, there was a well.
Had that water.
Okay, and does anybody, I don't know, I'm going off of my mother's handwriting, so I have no idea what half of this means. Does anybody have any comments about the blizzard of 78? Sharon, Mama, you've been quiet.
The blizzard of 77,
78?
78.
78. Ben was just an infant, and he was on formula, and I ran low, and snow was up to my chin. Nobody could get around. Absolutely nobody was getting out. Don always had a Jeep. Most of his life, he's had a Jeep
Of some kind.
of some kind, and he had a Jeep, and he put chains on that Jeep, and Denny plodded down through the snow and got down to his house And they went to town in that Jeep and got formula for Ben.
And
So
so the recorded snow that year was 7 foot.
The road was closed. I mean, there was no way to get out. But they had one lane for emergency travel only. So we did get to town and get Ben's formula. He might not have been here today if we hadn't.
How long did it take you? Very long?
No, oh, maybe an hour, you know.
Not too bad.
I think there was an IGA store north town at that time.
Yeah, you're right.
But yeah, that's the way that happened. And we got out and got him some formula and got back.
How long did it take?
Hour
An
and a
hour?
half. Well, mine took longer than that because my Jeep was in the garage up behind the house, and there was about 4 feet of snow in the driveway. And I would drive down and hit that snowbank and stop, then back up and hit it again several times before I got through that snowbank just to get to the road. But that was a terrible snow.
Is that the worst of,
But we had a lot of fun.
you think the worst of your time was the blizzard of 78? You think it's the worst one?
Probably,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the two-wheel drive Jeep.
Yeah, it was a 2-wheel-drive Jeep, but we had skid chains on it. And then there was a neighbor across the road, Mr. Gillen. We got up to the highway, which was like just one lane partially open, and he had shoveled a path from his house down to the highway. And we drove up there and stopped, and he come walking out there to us. But I was thinking he was needing something really bad. You know what he said? Would you have a cigarette on you?
who was
Which
that?
was that, Larry?
Ronnie Gillen.
Oh,
Ronnie.
Ronnie, of course it was. Of course.
Okay, Sharon, would you like to talk about the Buell and the hay fork?
Well, what I call the sheep barn, Don was saying it was really the horse barn. When they put hay up, they didn't have a baler then. And they had a hay fork that they'd stick down in the hay on the wagon. It had prongs that come out and would lift a bunch of hay up. And I was on a mule back behind the barn, and when they would get that up in the air, there was a track that ran the length of the barn. So they'd holler at me, and I would take that mule, and we'd plod along till they'd tell me to stop wherever they wanted to put this hay. And I'd stop, and then they'd trigger it and get the hay where they wanted
They had a long rope to pull
to release the
to
hay.
release
So,
the hay.
yeah, I can remember sitting on that old mule. There was flies, and it was kind of stinky, but I thought it was an important job.
The truth is, that old mule had done that very same thing whether anybody was on it or not. It knew when to go and when to stop.
Did it have a name?
Was it
Mabel,
Mabel? I think it was Mabel.
Mabel Buell.
Yeah.
He had 2 mules, Joe and Mabel.
Joe and Mabel.
now, Mabel was his daughter, Dad's sister, you know,
Yes, yeah.
and Joe was her husband. He named the mules Joe and Mabel.
Of course he did.
Okay, what were, and this is open to all of you, what were the good things and the bad things about the log cabin,
Growing up in
it?
Well, the good things, it had a kitchen, and Mom knew how to cook.
We always had great food. They raised it, preserved it. We had wonderful food, and Mother was a good cook.
She was.
And that's one of the good things. There were a lot of good things, honestly, when you think back. I can remember we had a potbelly stove in the front, we called it the front room.
Mm-hmm.
Kept it all stoked up all the time. Now the other rooms got a little cool, very cool, but you know, you piled on the blankets or quilts. And so when it came time to do a little bit of cleanup, you got a porcelain wash pan. You went to the pitcher pump, got her full, set it on top of the stove, let it get, because that water was cooled, let it heat up a little bit and go around behind the stove, take your bath.
Yes.
And, you know, It didn't hurt any of us to grow up that way. We had an outhouse. Grandma had chickens out there, and boy, there was the meanest old rooster out there you've ever seen, and he kept trying to flog me. And I said, Dad, that rooster's after me. Dad, that rooster's after me. And Dad said, is he? Well, we'll take care of that. And the next Sunday, we had chicken and dumplings for dinner. One of my memories. Playing in the woods was a wonderful thing in the creek. I can remember trying to dam up the creek. Also, it was during the time when you could get on your bike and ride up and down the road, not be worried about being harmed or whatever. Our bikes, we had a nice bike. Dad would pull 3 or 4 bikes out of the dump and then put parts together to make one good bike. So we had a bike and
One good bike.
one good bike.
Did you ever fight over it?
I usually had my own
remember
bike.
He would have a bike for pretty much for all of us.
Yeah.
I know we, of course, didn't have any, we had what we needed, but we didn't have anything. But the two things that's kind of funny because one of the cousins, Jeannie Knoll, always thought we were rich because we had a bike. They didn't have a bike. And Fred Shields always said he thought we were rich because we had that pitcher pump in the kitchen.
So there is a story about a window and hairbrush.
It's his fault.
I want to know what that fight was about. We've never heard about what the fight was about. What was the fight about?
Well, I don't think there was, cause I guess I'll admit, I teased her a lot,
Mm-hmm.
if you can believe that. And one time, we was all getting ready to sit down to eat dinner, and I just happened to pull a chair out from under her as she started to sit down. She hit the floor. I mean, well, she was kind of mad over that. Wouldn't take a joke.
Well, the hairbrush thing, I was brushing my hair and he was being his usual, And he got between me and the window, actually. And I got so mad, I threw that hairbrush and he ducked and it went through the window. Now, it's his fault because if he hadn't have ducked, it'd hit him.
I'm behind you, Sharon, on that one.
Any bad things about living in a cabin?
I don't know if it would be bad or not, but there was times, the cabin had a wooden
Shingle roof.
split out of blocks of wood and nailed on. And one night, winter, had a big fire. There was some sparks come out and caught some of those shingles on fire. And Mom got me, I don't know if I was in bed, anyway, got me out. Hey, there's fire up there. And at that time, we had an electric pump, water pump. So I got the hose out, and now you could climb up the logs, you could climb up the corners of the house on the log and get up on the roof. I got up there with the hose and put that fire out. That was kind of a bad thing.
And
Did you
that
have
was
to do that more than once?
that was because I saw the sparks
Okay.
coming down off the roof.
roof.
In my bedroom,
Yeah.
was in the front up there, and I saw sparks coming.
Mhm.
And I
Isn't that-
thought, what in the world,
And-
And I finally got Mother and said, "What? Look at this!" And it
Yeah.
was a fire. It would have burned.
Yeah. And the boys slept upstairs, and if the wind was blowing just right in a snowstorm, it would blow in underneath those shingles, and you'd wake up in the morning, there'd be a little sheet of snow on your covers.
Which makes me think, Bill, could you tell us again the story about how it come to be a log house instead of a framed house?
Well, Dad and Mom, being a young couple, and times were hard in the,
Depression times,
they,
no money.
Granddad Jillian had inherited quite a lot of land in that neighborhood on Mount Village Road, and he gave he had a lot of girls and 2 boys. He gave each one of the kids a plot of ground. And Mom's ground fell right You may not remember where the
I
cabin
do,
was,
Mount
but
Gilead
that was
Road,
her, that was Mom's share of that piece of ground. And Dad said, well, and the place down home where I live now, has always been a lot of timber there. And he said, well, I'll cut some logs, we'll saw it up into lumber, and I'll build a house. But when they brought some logs down and sawed it, the boards fell apart because it was what they called wind shaky, and it had twisted those trees enough so that
Boards had cracks.
the boards wouldn't hold together.
Yeah,
And that's the only time I ever heard anybody talk about anything being wind shaky, but that's what Granddad called that. And Dad said, well, I don't have any lumber to build a house. I'll just use the logs. So he used the logs to build that house.
well, so the logs came from your home place where you live now,
Yes.
but they built this cabin on Mount Gilead
Yes.
Road, up on the hill.
Dad he'd always look for a bargain of some kind. And they used to have what he called lightning rod agents. That was a kind of a put down from some of the salesmen that went around trying to sell lightning rods. It was a big business. People don't think about putting lightning rods on anything anymore, but that was the fad. But this old guy had been selling those, and he had a couple of trucks that he would take the body, this fancy body off, and put on a new chassis. The frame, that left the frame and the wheels. And Dad had run across two of them that he bought for nearly nothing. And he rigged up a fifth wheel that I tied the logs to here and put them on a trailer back, and he hauled those logs long enough to go between the doors and the windows and corners and haul them all up there from where I live down there up on Mount Gilead Road.
Which is not a straight shot and it's not flat ground.
And the roads weren't as good then as they are now.
Yeah,
How far would that have been?
Oh, what is it, 5 miles?
yeah, yeah.
A
Oh,
little more than
yeah, I'd say near 8 or
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
8 or 10. But the house lasted long enough to raise us, all of us kids.
Now, it did. The water would get down in those cracks in them logs, and it deteriorated long before it should have.
Yeah, but it lasted long enough.
And then what happened to the house after it had deteriorated?
Mom, at that time, Sharon was living in the little house on the corner,
Mhm.
and she built a new house where she is now,
Mhm.
close. And
Yeah.
Mom and Dad moved into her little house, and it wasn't. Dad didn't last very long after that, but
didn't,
he sold the property to Paul Wampler. I don't know if any of you remember Paul Wampler. Wampler lived next house up from us, and he tore a house down and built another house. Since then, there's been more, I don't know, one or more houses built on that property. But that's the way that happened.
Yeah, I have one last question and then you can talk about memories or whatever. So we know that Noble drove a bus for Unionville, is that correct? For Unionville when he was a student.
Yeah.
And the rumor has it that Grandma Viola rode his bus. Can anyone confirm or deny that?
I don't think that would be likely, although he did, at that time, Brummels Creek Road wasn't passable with more than a horse and buggy. And he had to go back down Brummels Creek to 46, go clear up to, over the hill to, can't think of
What's the name of the road?
the name of the road that went across there. But anyway, he went up the Stevens Creek Hill and then went across to the Unionville Road and back. Granddad was always looking for a way to make another 2 cents. And at that time, students were furnished their own transportation to school. If they had an extra buggy and a horse, they had a barn close to the school that they could stable the horses in while the students were in school. And Granddad got a hold of the trustee, and he said, if I got a bus, could Noble drive that bus, and I could get the money that those students would get for the stabling their horse and taking care of their buggy and so forth. The trustee said it's up to the people. They can do what they want to with the money. So he established a school bus route while Dad was still in high school. And Dad drove the bus and hauled the kids from the immediate area to Unionville, but they had to go up the Stevens Creek Hill and then back out.
This was probably a Model T bus.
Okay, so just to let you all know that Sharon has Noble's old junior yearbook. We can't really touch it because it's coming apart, but I took pictures out of that. And so the pictures of these buses that you're describing are in Sharon's book on her table. And it is interesting to see, because they had some mechanized buses, and then right beside it, they had two, I think, horse-drawn buses.
Yeah.
So the story is true, and that's amazing that a student, I can't imagine turning a junior loose with a school bus. But that's one of the stories. At this point, if any of you have any questions that you want to ask, now would be the time to do it. We just wanted to get them on film, sharing some of the stories. If there's stories you've heard that you want to hear again, now's the time to jump in and ask. And if not, if you guys have something you want to state.
Well, the only thing I could say growing up, the times were hard. We never went hungry. You hear people, even today, you got people going hungry. And there was no food banks and stuff like that. People made it on their own. Of course, most people lived in the country. We always had a hog or two to butcher. And Mom would have them big crocks and put meat and salt, what they call salt pork in those. Had no refrigeration, but it kept the meat, and it was good.
Now, isn't there a story? I feel like Mom told the story one time about, and I don't know where it originated, but maybe a dog pulled up a dead animal onto the porch.
Yes.
Okay.
And there was somebody said, see, God will provide, or.
That would be our grandmother, my Galleon, my mother's mother. They grew up poor. Compared to how they grew up, we had it good.
Yes.
They were very poor. They just didn't have anything, and they had a bunch of kids, out of them 9 kids or something. They tried to get raised and fed, and one time they had an old dog, and this old dog dragged the rabbit right up to the door. Grandma looked out and said, look, the Lord will provide. So she got that rabbit and dressed it and had some meat on the table. Yeah.
I do want to say though, Dad was always doing something mechanically, and we were talking about when each one of us turned 16. He had a car. It would not have been the most beautiful thing, but it was mechanically as sound as he could make it, and the boys would paint them.
We would.
The boys painted our car.
Yeah, Brother Bill, I want to thank you for painting that 55 Chevy that I got when I was 16 years old. Thank you.
What color was it, Mom?
It was mint green. Mint green, yeah.
Didn't one of you have a car that didn't really have a floorboard in it or something?
That was Dad's. That was one of our family cars, an old Studebaker. And it was dependable as far as I know, as you went down the road, you could see the road there. But he usually had an old piece of something laying there to hide it. But it didn't stay there all the time, so you could look down. Oh, there's the road. Yeah, that was Dad said one time, I'll never have a car that's too good for my kids to drive.
That's exactly what he said.
Oh,
Tell the story about the two old boys and the team of horses that ran down into the Bronx Creek.
Okay.
This is good. It's the best story I've ever heard.
Well, in that era, horses and wagons were the transportation of country people. And I don't remember the name of the brothers, but there was two brothers that early one morning, they took the wagon and team and went to town, bought a bunch of groceries, and back then they usually took a feed sack and they put the groceries in the feed sack, hid it, threw it in the wagon. But they stayed a little too long and they began to get a little bit happy drinking out of the bottle that they got. And they came back out at 46, we're what we call 46 now, and they turned on Lower Bertie Galleon and up on the Fleener Road. And when they got down to bottom of Fleener Road, now we turn and go around this way, but that wagon road went straight across. The creek was up. Water had rained all for 2 or 3 days, and the water was deep, deep. And they had, being kind of happy, they had run that team all the way from Bloomington out there. And the team was just hot and sweaty, and they drove them right off into that water. And the water was running swift. And that wagon just went to rolling like this. And one of them jumped off and went over to the house close by. And he said, the team and he's called his brother by name, they've drowned. So everybody got out and went to looking up and down the creek bank. And the wagon bed was still upside down. The wheels the axle nuts had run off with the wheels turning backwards. And the wheels had disappeared, and the wagon box was upside down, and a little bit a head come up beside it. The other brother was in the air pocket up in the wagon bed, but it washed that wagon way off down Salt Creek, down to the team.
I had never heard that story. It wasn't any of our family.
No, they wasn't.
Well, the whole time you were saying they were happy, I was thinking this was one of the ones that didn't get told.
But
Not saying, well,
That's all right. We're not gossiping. We're just telling an old story here.
when the water went down, the boys started up and down the creek. They'd find a wheel here, and they hunted till they even found all the nuts that held the wheels onto the wagon, which is a thing about
Big
this
thing,
big,
yeah.
an axle nut on the wagon. And they took the harness, the horses drowned in the drift. They took the harness off and salvaged that, put all the wagon back together. But that was one of the local stories that Granddad used to tell about.
Wow.
What happened.
Anybody? Oh, go ahead. So, Patrick, when he was in 4th grade, had to do like a family tree type presentation. And we were at Mom and Dad's one day, and Patrick was talking about all the cool things that, these people were bringing in to present for their family tree. And Mom said, well, I have a story that you can tell that will blow everybody's away. And it's the story about the kind of the town bully that your grandpa took care of.
Oh, Grandpa
Can you tell
Galleon.
that story?
Now, I don't know if I'm telling this right, because there's a couple of different versions. Or it's changed with the telling, I don't know, but Grandpa and Grandma lived over there in the old Gallion house, and supposedly there was this guy that was no one liked him. Everyone feared him. They were afraid of him all around the area there. And Grandpa said, well, he better not come here. I'll take care of him if he does. Well, he did come, and Grandpa got his gun, or was sitting there with his gun. I don't know which.
He was sitting with his guns, the only thing I
And
know.
the way I know it is that the guy, or the grandpa told the guy not to come. Do not come in. Do not come in. And the guy started to open the screen door, and Grandpa just blew him away right through the screen door. And the next Sunday, all the neighbors came by, shook Grandpa's hand. That's the story I heard. Now, let's hear your version.
The story I heard was, it was over a fence line. They was arguing over property over the fence line. And the guy had told Granddad he was going to kill him. And so that's the story I had. And
It was self-defense.
And he when he come up there, the other guy had a gun. He come up close to Grandpa, killed him. And the law came out and asked him a few questions, and
He was trespassing when he,
I understood too that Grandpa was sitting there with his gun, and he said, if you come through that door, I'm gonna shoot you. I'm sitting here with my gun, you come in the door, I'm gonna shoot you. So.
he did. He did.
He wasn't lying.
One line.
Dad told me a lot of different twists on it. Yes, it all happened pretty much just like you said, but Grandpa was sitting there with the gun, and that guy was over there with the gun, and Grandma looked up and said, "Oh, Jim," and she grabbed, and when she grabbed him,
So he pulled the trigger.
the gun went off.
Well, that's a different story.
That is different.
That's a whole new twist. Like St. Patrick's story made the classroom just go upside down and killed it.
Now, I don't know where Dad got his information, but that's,
It seems to me like Alpha was the one that was
Sharing that.
Yeah, that I remember telling about it.
Yeah.
Bill, do this as two bros.
Well,
Old man's piece.
the space
speed
story.
story. Don can tell you the speed story.
Well, as you turn in to go to Burma's Creek Road, that is
Rock Road.
Brock Road. Back in the day, you went on up Brock Road, and it was open, and it was more just a fire trail, really. It wasn't much of a road, but you could get up there up on top of the hill. And there was a cabin up there. An old man Space lived there by himself. Now, I don't know if he was ever married. I never did hear anything about it, but as long as I can remember, he just lived by himself as a hermit. And he had dogs that he coon hunted. And so somehow or other, somebody went up there, and I don't know who it was, but found him dead. Now, this is kind of a gory story.
But things happen.
And it looked like the dogs were tied at the doghouse. The old man had to carry the kerosene lamp out on the porch, probably to put some more oil in it, they're thinking, and had a heart attack and just fell over. And the dogs could just get to his head, down to his neck. And they chewed all that off and carried his skull back in the doghouse.
Yummy. Okay. I think I remember that story.
Yeah. And Joe Fleener heard about it, and they had a horse at that time, and Joe Fleener rode his horse up there, and he said he got up there and that horse got so spooky. He said that horse turned around, and he said he never went home so fast all his life, that horse. It was really picking him up and putting him down, because it scared the horse being in that situation.
Tell us about your memories of Christmas time with kids growing up.
With the motorcycles,
Hey, memories of going visiting with people?
one year, all three boys were home. They was young.
Now, this is when you were growing up. Not us. Not us, when you was little.
Oh, when I was young. Okay. we always went to Grandpa and Grandma Spriggs for Christmas. I mean, that was the big, big thing. And when I went, of course, I would sleep upstairs where Bill used to have her bedroom. And if we got one toy, we was really, really happy, you know. And one year, I got a bicycle, and it was fresh painted, black and red, beautiful, but it had been put together out of pieces that Dad put together. And that was a big, big Christmas for me. Another year, I got a wind-up Caterpillar tractor with actually rubber cleats that you could wind it up and it'd go across. You know, loved it. And but that's the kind of things we had. We got apples and oranges and stuff like that. You know, but one big thing usually is what we got.
It was fun though. It was a
fun.
joyous day because there was a lot of laughter.
Oh yeah.
Everybody we laughed a lot. It was fun.
It was a good day.
Yeah, it was.
And how we all got in that little kitchen around that table beats
I don't
me.
know, but we did.
But they
Mabel
pulled
and
that
Joe.
table out and put the benches in behind it, and I mean, people were just sitting.
Mabel and Joe and Mina and Lauren.
Yeah.
And
all of us.
Mabel would always fix a nice pie. And Grandpa Spriggs he was like to go to A&P back when they was called it the Atlantic and the Pacific to get groceries. And she'd bring a real nice homemade pie. He'd take a bite of that. He said, "Boy, that's a pretty good 15-cent pie." You know, like you get at A&P. She'd say, "That's not a 15-cent pie." She'd disagree her. But just aggravated me. So we get that. Honestly, that aggravation.
And Bill about Grandpa buying bananas.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's two stories to that.
Well, Grandpa and Grandma always, every week they went to town. One, and they always had eggs to sell. And in the right seasons, they had
Sweet corn.
breast chickens, sweet corn,
Maybe. Yeah.
the produce from the garden. They tried to sell something to pay for what they paid to buy.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that Granddad did a lot, and that's he'd buy a big can of bananas. And I just happened to be down there one evening after they came home from town, and Grandpa pulled off some of them bananas and said, "Here, take these home to the kids."
Your brothers, your sisters.
Well, I started back up the road driving my old car, and one of them bananas looked good, so I reached over there, broke one off. It was so good. That's just not going to work because there's not going to be enough bananas to go around. So I better be some more of them. I didn't get home with any bananas.
So the next time I was down to Grandpa's, he said, "How'd you like them bananas I sent home with Bill?" I said, "Huh?" And then I teased Bill about going back home. I followed the banana peelings along the road to get home.
Can I ask, how many people here actually attended Unionville in some way, shape, or form?
School?
Yeah, raise your hand if you went to Unionville school.
Patrick, you did not read.
You didn't do Unionville. Yes, yeah, because some of the younger ones here even went there. I think it's 4 or 5 generations.
Yeah, Evan over there went to Unionville.
So did Becca and,
Yeah.
Billy went? Did not know that. Okay.
Wow.
Well, he might be one of the younger
I
ones.
bet he
that-
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unionville Arrows.
So they have a reunion every year.
Yeah.
How did the tractor climbs, the hill climbs? I remember a few of those. How did those start?
The what?
The The wheel horse,
Tractor
the hill climbs.
Well, we were hunting for nuts,
Was that?
yeah. With the tractors and wagons, and Grandpa would take us up over the hill.
Well, but we went.
Yeah.
Well, that was when we got riding lawn tractors and
Yeah,
pulled,
yeah.
pulled trailer behind
Wagons,
them and load with kids. We took several trips for miles up over
Yeah.
the hills and the hollers. And one year we went to clear up and came out at Lawrence, around Lawrence house,
Yeah,
and came back to
come
Howard
back down, went up
through the woods.
Baby Creek, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was Baby Creek.
Went up Baby Creek, clear up to 45, and then up the road a little ways, and then came back down Silver Ridge a ways, and then came back down
Riding,
Brummage Creek.
riding lawn tractors, pulling trailers.
Did someone break down at one time?
Oh, it always
probably.
happens.
And were there any tractor pulls?
Oh,
We had,
yes.
we
Oh,
had
yes,
tractor pulls.
yeah.
That was later,
That's probably what she was thinking about.
maybe.
Tell them about the meets we'd have on
Well-
Sunday afternoon.
We just all get together with our lawn tractors and see who could pull the biggest load. And we'd have a sled with concrete blocks. We'd load concrete blocks on it and pull as far as we could. And then another guy'd see if he could go further. And then he'd put more blocks on and, and some of those tractors, I mean, you get the front wheels up off the ground, and they're just kind of going. But it was fun, and we did that a lot back when we were kids.
Whose tractor?
Or not kids,
No,
but
no, you weren't.
young adults.
Yeah.
Tractor pulls.
Who won? Who would win?
We all won at one time or another. I mean, that wasn't a big thing. Just doing it was the fun, and getting together and making fun of one another, and
When Roy and I first got married, he used to say every time it rained, someone thought they had to have a cookout.
yeah.
Because we had a cookout like every weekend.
And then we got to cheating and putting weights on our rear wheels, And
I worked at a wheel horse shop at
What was
that
it you
time.
put in
And
the
I had
tires
access
to
to
make them
anything
ready?
that would help.
I don't remember ever putting
Did
anything.
something put in the tires?
I think probably the last one we had, I had a wheel horse prepared. I'd worked all week getting it ready, and I had weights on it that you couldn't see all over. And they kept, well, bring that wheel horse up, no, I'll wait a while. And after they all got pulled, all they could pull, then I backed it up there and just slid off down across.
Strategist.
We used to have sled rides on the hill
Mhm.
and also took rides to the sugar camp when we were young. I don't know who all remembers.
There are some pictures over here on Sharon's book on her table of, it's either Sharon's or mine, but of some of those sled rides.
The sled was good off.
Good off a car, yeah.
Some of them, sometimes. We also had other sleds, but yeah.
And we all pile on top.
But the horse had to pull the hood back up, right, or the tractor?
Or two or three strong kids.
Okay, well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up, but one last thing I want to ask each of you is what is your favorite memory of your parents? Bill, we'll start with you. We'll go down.
Wow.
That's hard. I don't have any that are not good. One unusual thing that I remember, Mom didn't go to town. Only, usually once a year. Dad would pick up, when he worked at the poultry house, Harold Fleener had a grocery store just across the street and up about a half a block. And he would take the grocery list in and leave it. And when he got ready to go home, the groceries were all sacked up, ready for him to put in the car. And Mom would make the list out, what she wanted to buy. And once a year, usually, Dad would we'd all go to get in the car and Dad would take us down to Aunt Corey's, all of us. And Mom would
Would take us
wait there till the city
Korea.
bus came by there. We'd all get on the bus and we'd go uptown. And we'd get new blue jeans, shirts, socks for school. And that was a big occasion.
It was a big deal.
It was.
Don?
Well, you know, all the times growing up were good. As we talked about earlier, Dad always had some way of getting an automobile when we got 16. Of course, we knew how to drive far before we got 16. But some of you will remember the little Jeepster I had, the yellow one with the black fenders. Sharon remembers it well because she borrowed it a lot.
Yeah,
There's a picture of it over
yeah,
here.
that's picture.
Is there a picture there?
Yeah.
That was sitting in town with the whole front end knocked off of it. It had been in a wreck. Somebody had hit it and just from the windshield up to the front was just bent over sideways. Dad saw it there. And it was a total loss, of course. Somebody had already bought the top off of it. It had a cloth top. And they were just kind of parting it out. And Dad went in there and made a deal and bought it. And we went in and Bill was probably out. Drug that home and took it off all the way down to the frame. Everything, the motor, fenders, hood, everything off from the windshield up. And tied that thing fast. We had a shop at that time and got a come along and hooked onto that frame and had the car chained to something. Wouldn't move and twisted that frame back around as straight as we could get it. And then welded where it was bent.
And as I recall, that always did want to pull.
It did.
Just a little bit.
And bought what we call a doghouse from the windshield up off of an old Jeep station wagon, which was identical to it. It was made a lot like this old Jeep station wagon. And we painted that. Bill helped me paint it, I think.
I don't know. I remember it well. Remember working on it. I don't remember whether
It was gray originally, and I said I don't want to buy yellow with black fenders. That's what we did. And it was just a fun ride.
Special.
It's a long time, didn't it?
Yeah.
Had it a long time.
You remember?
Barbara said you had it a long time.
She said you had it a long time, didn't
Oh,
you?
yeah.
Hey, Sharon, what's your favorite memory of your parents?
Well, you know, it's really hard. But one of the things I've thought about is back in the earlier, I don't know, Mother baked biscuits every morning for breakfast. We had biscuits and gravy every morning for breakfast. That was a good breakfast.
Yes. I appreciate
Hang on, Mama,
that she,
1 second. Handmade from scratch biscuits,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Okay.
yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Mama.
I appreciate that she really did the best she could to keep a clean home. And she was all the time scratching around, trying to save up money to paint a wall in the living room or do something, you know. She really worked hard with what she did have to keep a nice clean home and a wonderful cook. Dad, I loved that he was so calm usually. I don't know if he was that way. I was the youngest, so I probably got the best of everything. But this is how I learned to drive. He'd be going down to visit Grandpa, and we'd get in one of those old cars, and I would drive, and I was probably 11, 12 years old. I drove all the way, and he'd be sitting over here sleeping the whole way. And he had an old Jeep truck, And he would just turn me loose in it down there in the lot. We called it the lot.
Yeah.
Down at Grandpa's, and I'd just go motoring around. It had second gear out, so I had to bypass second gear. But that's the way we learned to drive.
Yeah.
And he never, I remember coming home one night in the night, and he decided to go clean a road. Well, it had rained, and there was a huge mud hole. And he wasn't going to be able to get through it. Well, he just kept backing up and getting a run, backing up and getting. We made it through. That was one thing that. I was pretty young. Another time there was a huge snow, and he did the same thing on Unionville Road to get through the snowbank. He back up. He charged. Finally got through that snowbank when everybody else, no one else would try that, but that's how he was. And it was neat.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead now. I have a question about the hen houses that were in the old cars. I mean, obviously growing up for me, I just assumed everybody's grandpas and grandmas had hen houses that were made out of cars. I mean, was that common, or was that something that was unique to?
You can ask Andy about that. That car's still there.
Is it? Well, how did that come to be where hen houses were made
It was
out of?
just an old Dad. Dad was always trying to find a bargain and get old cars to fix up and sell, or fix up and drive. And at that time, the cab company had 1956 Dodges for cabs. Now that's 56. And he bought 3 or 4 in there or something like that.
Yeah,
A number.
I think there's probably at least 4.
And he would take the good parts off some, put them on the, and we took one down to Grandpa Spriggs, and he drove it for quite some time.
Repainted it, and it didn't look like a cab anymore.
Yeah. Anyway, he had one old body that was left, just a body. He drug it over there down below Andy's house and set it up on blocks and said, well, it'll make a good place for the chickens. And just and cut holes in the doors so they get in and out. Perfect chicken house. It's dry, so it's still there.
He had an old car that he had set by the barn that he kept his hoe, and he used it for like an outhouse or an outbuilding. But he had cars just sitting around with different things in it where he would work.
Well, I don't
He had cars sitting
remember
by the
that.
garden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
One time I remember an old Cadillac being over there in the garage, your garage lot by the highway. Do you remember that?
we had one at one time we fixed up and sold.
Well, I wonder if that's the one. I said, Dad, I want to drive that car. It had a rag top and it had a big hole in it, and it was just flapping when it went down the road.
I don't remember that.
I said, I want to drive that. And he gave me the keys to that car, and I drove that car to town, that top just flapping.
Remember that?
No, I don't remember
Only
the car.
time I ever drove a Cadillac, probably be the last time I'll ever drive a Cadillac.
I'd love to get
Yeah.
pictures.
His wife made them.
Yeah.
Oh.
She can make them.
For everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a question.